What the f?
So far in this Angmar project, we've built orcs, zombies, and ghosts. But while these are formidable foes, we haven't had anyone to lead them yet. Until now. Today, we're going to go over how I approach the Lords of Angmar, rulers of the North and dread servants of the Great Darkness, the Ringwraiths of Angmar. I tried to make them look suitably different. In the Tales of Middle-earth, the Forces of Good did not know that the ones leading the Forces of Angmar were the Nazguls until the very end, and so I wanted to get away from the classic Nazgul look, make it look like it could almost be alive. This also helps tie the army into the film lore, as in the Hobbit movies, it's implied that the Witch King was alive during the Wars of Angmar, or so it seems. I also heavily base these off of some of my favorite evil fantasy characters, namely the Wild Hunt from the Witcher video games, and now the show, and the Horned King from the old Black Cauldron movie. I built the majority of these guys way back when I did my original orcs, and so today, I'm going to show you how I approach them by building the last one I need, the Witch King on Armored Horse. And first of all, I needed a horse. My go-to horses for these has been from the Morgul Knights kit, but for the Witch King, I wanted something different to set him apart. So I chose to pick up a Mouth of Sauron, chucked the mouth, and kept the horse. This way, he had the same basic design as the rest, but a different pose, some additional detail, and even some extra weight from the metal. Next, I grabbed a Morgul Knight and cut him at the waist to use his legs, before also cutting an Army of the Dead up to steal his torso. For the head, I also used one from the Morgul Knights kit, but did a little bit of alterations. I first cut out a bit of the face mask and gently bent out the side guards in order to open the helmet up a bit, and even used my pin vise to drill out the eyes a bit to make them just a little bigger and rounder to really accentuate that skull look. To assemble him, I drilled a hole right through the horse, legs, torso, and head in order to pin them all together. This also let me assemble it piece by piece, rotating each as need be around the central pin to find the right position before gluing it all together. Once that was all correct, I added an arm from the Warriors of the Dead sprue, and with that, it was on to sculpting. First, I wanted to fill in the gaps between the rider and horse, and so added some green stuff to the underside of his robes before pressing him onto the horse to get a better fit. Next, I filled in the gaps of the horse and sculpted on the last little details like a belt, as well as the little half cape / scarf thing I gave him. The other thing I wanted to do with this guy was to give him a really nice base, and once again I turned to artwork. Particularly these ones by Alan Lee and John Howe of the Witch King overlooking his forces marching out of Minas Morgul. I wanted to recreate that stoic look, and decided to do what you're always supposed to do with heroes. I put him on a rock. I mocked this up with some blue tack to see how it would look before sculpting a big rocky overlook out of green stuff. I wanted to give this a kind of layered slate look, so I added lines to the rock base before texturing the rest of the base with some extra stones and my mix of base and grit. I also liked the idea of him sitting above a frozen lake, and so did the same crackle paste look I used on my barrow whites. And with all that done, I pinned and glued him to the base, filling in any empty space with my modeling paste. And we were ready to go. I primed all of the models in my standard Angmar style, a mid-tone blue with a zenithal highlight of brown from above to get that fun mix of cold and warm colors. For the actual painting, I did them all individually, but in the same style, so let's once again focus on the Witch King. I also mainly used Citadel paint, not for any particular reason, but just because I had them around, though you could always absolutely switch out any of these colors and get a similar look. I started with the base, painting the ground in Macragge blue and all the rocks in Dawnstone. I then made a slightly desaturated brown by mixing Mechanica Standard Grey and Mournfang brown to paint the sticks and twigs I'd added. Moving on to the models themselves, I kept the underclothes the classic Ringwraith black. I mostly stuck to this for the Tainted and Dwemer but for the Witch King I wanted to mix it up, and so made a kind of salmony pink color by mixing Mephiston red with Cadian flesh tone, and used this to paint his kind of overcoat. I then picked out some of the smaller details like his scabbard and the belt in Mournfang brown, before getting weird again with my metals. I mixed up gold, silver, and a bit of green to give this muted, sickly color, and painted most of the metal like this, but kept his faceplate and sword in a more classic silver. Then it was just onto painting the cape in Dawnstone, and we were ready for washes. I again used my dual wash approach by hitting the base and lower sections in blue with Draconoth Nightshade, and the upper parts in brown with Agrax Earthshade. Once that was dried, I quickly dry brushed the base, starting with Dawnstone for the rocks and Xandri Dust for the earth, before doing a lighter overall dry brush of Screaming Skull, followed by a really light final dry brush of Pure White. Then I added a bit more color to the armor by adding a few patches of slightly watered down Mournfang brown to give a really simple and patchy rust effect, before jumping straight into the highlights. This was by far the longest part of the process, but also the easiest, as I highlighted all of the non-metal bits in the exact same way, by simply mixing more and more white into the base colors until we got to an almost pure white final layer. For the armor I did almost the exact same thing, but started by mixing in more and more bright silver before starting to mix in the white. Once that was all done, I came to my favorite step, adding some extra color to the black robes. Basically, I took a transparent colored paint, in the Witch King's case, watered down Flesh Terror's red, and glazed that over the edges of the cloth. This gave a really cool extra pop to the robes, and I finished it off with a final highlight of white over top of the glaze, just on the edges. For the other two wraiths, I did the same thing but mixed up the colors, green for the Tainted, and blue for the Dwemer Lake. And with that, the Lords of Angmar were done. I really love how these guys turned out, as while they still read as Ringwraiths to me, I feel like they're really unique and a different take on them. I've also been having a lot of fun recently with these really stark white highlights, as I feel like they give the models a really unnatural look that suits the wraiths and helps to make them pop on the table as well. Also, the different colors on each wraith should not only help make them different thematically, but help my opponent differentiate them in game, as it's always important to be able to quickly identify models, and that's always a challenge with heavily converted armies. And so technically, I finally have a fully functional Angmar army. Nazgul leading a host of orcs backed up with specters and wights is honestly not a bad place to start, but now that they're all out of the way, things are about to get a whole lot more monstrous. Before we sign off though, I first wanted to welcome all of my new subscribers. This last week has been an absolute shock. I'm still blown away by the response I've gotten. So if you like what you're seeing and looking for more stuff, hop over onto my Twitter and Instagram, or take a look at my Patreon. We've got some fun rewards there, like a private Facebook group, and even exclusive Founders Dice for the first 25 people who join up, which brings me to my oldest subscribers and Patreon founders. Thank you so much for all your support and sticking with me all this time. I hope we're able to keep pushing this thing forward to being a bigger and bigger success. But for now, thank you all. I'm Anders, and have a good one.